Hi everyone and welcome to a look at the death of the physical body and how we the surviving can deal with the death of a loved one. Let's take a look at a few questions. What exactly happens when a person dies? Have you ever wondered if there really is a soul? It seems to be a concept that exists in many religions, but does it really exist? Why do we have rituals in many religions that seem to be very similar? Rituals that deal with handling the body and so on. And do all of these in any way help us to cope with the loss of a loved one? Let's go ahead and find out. Let's start by taking a look at what happens when we die. So to understand that, we first need to understand what exactly a physical body is. So a physical body may appear like an absolute structure to us, but it's always changing. The physical body we have today is completely different from the physical body we had a few months ago. Most of our physical body is not even our own cells, but consists of microbes. And the cells that we do have keep regenerating themselves. Our focus in this physical reality is also not constant. For example, when we go into a deep sleep, then our focus goes away from this body. And Seth likens our focus and our consciousness akin to a flickering firefly that comes and goes. So we lose focus of our physical body when we fall into a deep sleep, and then we get back into a focus. So from that point of view, death is just a deep sleep that has a longer interval in our time. And it's not going to involve coming back into this physical body, but maybe a different body. The other thing that we need to understand is that we have a physical reality, but we also have another more subtle reality which consists of our beliefs, the actions that we do, our thoughts, and our emotions. And if you haven't yet seen the video on this, please take a look at the link above. So what happens when we die is that our soul, and we'll see later what this means, becomes aware that the thoughts and beliefs that we had in this particular life are tangible and may need to be enacted out before moving forward. So we have guide souls that come and help the soul of the person that has died to go through a recovery phase, a rest and recovery phase. And during this phase, these guide souls may actually help enact some of these beliefs that the dead soul had. And after the recovery phase is over, then the soul of the dead person may then decide on where to go next. So the next thing that happens is that we become aware of how our physical reality was created. All the necessary transformations of energy at different levels of vibration in order to create the physical reality that we lived in. We also become aware after death of all the other different realities that coexist, which are not bound by space and time the way that it was viewed in our earlier life. Very often these realities are much more vivid and much more creative than the reality that we existed in when we were in our physical body. So now let's take a look at what we mean by the soul concept. So to do this, it'll actually be helpful to take a look at Hinduism, which is the oldest religion and dates back from the last epoch cycle. If you haven't seen the video yet on the 4 epochs, please take a look at it. So in Hinduism, there's 3 basic bodies or sharir. The first is the sthul sharir, which is our physical body as we see it. The next is the sukshma sharir, which is the subtle body that we have. And I think in Western parlance we would consider this to be our soul. And then there's a third body, which is the Karan Sharir, and Karan means reason. And this is the body that deals with the cause-effect nature of Maya and Karma. Underlying all of this is the divine seed that is there in all of us, that is unchanging, the unchanging witness, as it were, as discussed in the Vedanta. And this is basically called the Atma. So the Atma is not really the soul, but it's the underlying divinity. The closest thing to the soul as we understand it in the West would be the Sukshma Sharir. So let's take a closer look at the Sukshma Sharir. So the Sukshma Sharir consists of the Pran, or the Chi, or the life force. It consists of all our memories. It consists of our beliefs and emotions. It consists of any karmic imprints that we may have, that we have picked up in the recent life or in other lives. And this Sukshma Sharir, which again is what we call the soul, leaves the physical body, not only when we die but also when we sleep, and exists in other realities. After we die, the guide souls work with the Sukshma Sharir to enact any leftover beliefs that it may have before it can plug into different realities. So why do we have rituals after death that seem to be common across this planet, common across different cultures? There's two main reasons for these rituals. The first is to make it easy for the permanent separation that has now occurred between the Sukshma Sharir and the Sthul Sharir. And the next is, of course, to make it easier on the people who are still in the physical Maya, who knew the person who has passed and need to continue on their own journey. So let's take a look at some common rituals that exist across cultures. The first is a ritual that involves the washing and the handling of the Sthul body by the people who were close to the deceased. In more advanced countries, this may be going away, but actually this ritual has a purpose. It leads to the cathartic realization by the people who are left behind that the person's Sthul is now no longer necessary for that person. The next ritual that seems to be common across different cultures is the quick disposition of the Sthul body, as quickly as possible, either via cremation or burial. And this again reduces attachment to the Sthul body by the survivors who are left behind, but also by the Sukshma Sharir of the deceased, who may want to be trying to re-enter the Sthul body. There's also formal prayer ceremonies that are usually conducted in different religions, usually 3 to 5 days after the death, and then again 5 to 13 days after the death. And again, the purpose here is to allow the Sukshma Sharir to defocus more easily away from the Sthul Sharir and move on to other phases. So how do we use this knowledge to help us cope with the death of a loved one? Well, the first thing we need to understand is that grief is a very, very natural set of emotions that we will feel, and we should embrace the grieving process. In fact, the emotions that we feel during the grieving process very often will be very, very close to unconditional love, which is one of the purest, or actually the purest emotion. We should embrace the rituals that are there in our faith. They are there to help us cope with the loss and to move ahead with our own journey. We should also understand very specifically that the Sukshma Sharir of the deceased needs to be gone. It does not need to hang around. We should not ask them to stay. We should not be asking them questions. We should not be trying to reach them. Instead, we should encourage them to leave in the first few days after the death. So we want to engage in the group ceremonies that are often part of your religion or your faith that actively encourage the Sukshma Sharir of the deceased to defocus from the earlier Sthul Sharir. So for example, in Hinduism, there are several different pujas that happen, the main ones being on the fourth day, and then another one on the fifth or the seventh day, where smoke is let into the house in order to get the Sukshma Sharir to leave. However, this does not mean in any way that we are trying to negate the memories, the beliefs, the emotions, and any karmic build-up that has happened inside the Sukshma Sharirs of all the other people who came into contact with the deceased. So what do we conclude from this discussion? Well, if you're trying to reach enlightenment, that is just a deep visceral awareness that we don't really exist apart from all that is. Death in this existence allows us to defocus from the physical Maya existence and become aware of our higher selves that in many ways are more aware of our connectivity with all that is, but we still feel a sense of separation even after we die because we have a Sukshma Sharir which can transmigrate into different bodies. The real enlightenment happens once we realize at all levels that there is no separation from all that is, that there is only the Atma. There is no separate you.